What if I told you that 49 South Africans just landed in the United States? Not for vacation, not for business, but as refugees. Yes, refugees. And no, this isn't a plot twist from a dystopian film. It's real, it's raw, and it's raising eyebrows all the way from Pretoria to Washington, D.C.
Your thoughts about the 49 Afrikaners who are now in the United States as refugees?
Let me kick off, Collie, by saying I watched your interview with Collie Creel. I found what he said utterly despicable. He should be ashamed. His family should be ashamed of him. He was playing this populist thing of farm murders. He refused to acknowledge that there is no genocide. He kept on talking around and actually shifting the blame. I thought it was despicable. He's become a bit of a Carl Niehaus nowadays, old Cully. I think the 49 refugees is the height of absurdity. And I think every South African who watches this knows there is no genocide. Ek is 'n Afrikaner myself. There is no genocide. We are not being persecuted. We live, most of us live a privileged life. We have a constitution with a Bill of Rights in which it says you are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of race. We have the Human Rights Commission, we have equality courts, we have an open society, we have a free media. This is just fantasy, and I don't think it's about us. Frankly, Collie, I think this is about Trump's America. They have declared a war against diversity, equality, and inclusion, DEI as they call it, which our version of that is affirmative action and black empowerment.
Yeah.
And they're grabbing that to demonize us as if in any reasonable person's mind, after 300 years of colonialism and 50 years of apartheid, we could just sit back and say, let the natural forces, the market forces run with it. We had to do something to build on the ashes of the past.
Yeah.
But Trump doesn't understand it, and he's aided, like Simon said, aided by Elon Musk and Joel Pollak and other ex-South Africans who maybe had unhappy childhoods in South Africa.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that they did. But I did, let me tell you, I had 3 interviews this morning with British and European television stations. And it's kind of predictable what I was going to say and so on. And then I suddenly realized they don't really believe me. They keep on asking, but why would Trump do this if there's no genocide? Why would Trump do this if farmers, white people don't get their land taken away? And that's the damage it has done. It's demonized our country. It's damaged our country. And AfriForum and Solidarity should take a large part of the blame. Not these 49 people. They must be struggling. I'm sorry for them. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of white people and Afrikaners have emigrated. So they could have gone to either the United States or Australia or New Zealand, but they are struggling. They're not successful human beings here. And so they become partly economic migrants, but partly, I suspect, and I don't know any of them, partly, I suspect, an unwillingness to live in a non-racial democracy.
Max, if this is not about us as South Africa, as you've put it a moment ago, if this is about Trump and the diversity laws that he is fighting in his own country, how difficult or easy a discussion is President Ramaphosa going to have then with President Trump if indeed the meeting next week is going to take place between the two?
Listen, I take the freedom to speak frankly here. My dear old friend, President Ramaphosa, has been a bit of a disappointment over the last few years. But here's his one strength. He is a charming man. He's an utterly charming man. He is a highly sophisticated guy. He's going to sit there. He's going to charm Trump. I hope that he would get through to Trump, that Trump would stop listening to Joel Pollak and Elon Musk, because even his embassy here must tell them there is no genocide. Not a square centimeter of land had been taken away without compensation from white people in this country. Our judicial system is intact. I think maybe he'll make a breakthrough. Maybe he'll charm Trump. But with Trump, you never know.
Yeah.
He's not a very sophisticated political thinker. He's more of a businessman. I see the Qataris have offered him a fancy new Boeing. Maybe Cyril should offer him a golden Weber bride or something, you know?
Let me circle back to the 49 Afrikaners. If they are not the last to leave the country, Max, you've already made a number of statements about how not so successful they might not have been in this country. How should the rest of South Africa, therefore, react to this? Because possibly some people are watching this and saying, how can you be so unpatriotic to a country you were born in? So what should be the general attitude is perhaps what I'm asking you to the next group that leaves.
Yeah, I don't, as I said, I don't know any of these individuals. Maybe some of them are have horror stories to tell. And don't most of us have horror stories? As you yourself pointed out earlier, violence on the Cape Flats, violence in KwaZulu-Natal, in some of our townships, is a lot worse than the violence perpetrated upon farmers, people living on farms. I think there's been a very healthy reaction in South Africa, and that is to joke about it, to mock these people. And we should mock Kali Kriel with his shameless populism in front of on our television screen. We should be sorry for them. There are not many of them. There are a couple of chances. Maybe there'll be 100, 200, a few hundred of people who go over. And I can guarantee you, as a goeie Afrikaner myself, they're going to be, their children cannot go to school in Afrikaans. They cannot attend an AfriForum meeting. The weather is so bad they can't have a braai. It's going to be expensive. They're going to have to work in their own kitchens and in their own gardens. They are going to regret moving. And as soon as those stories come back, and they can't come back and attend Oma's verjaarsdag. That's not on. If you're a refugee, it's a serious thing. A refugee means your life is in danger. Some other country has to rescue you. No, that's the nonsense. I don't think this is a big phenomenon. I think it's nice to talk about it. It's not a huge phenomenon. As I said, it's more about MAGA America than it is about us. And I think the natural reaction to mock it, to joke about it, is a good one.
Let's end the conversation on MAGA America then. They seem to have a huge megaphone, and you have pointed out yourself that perhaps this is doing more damage than we are believing ourselves as South Africans, as you laid out earlier, the number of international media you were talking to, and why to them President Trump would be so insistent on a genocide that's going on here. How do we undo that? How do we take back the megaphone and use it to our advantage?
Well, yes, there's the whole thing of where there's smoke, there's fire. And of course, they see smoke, we don't see smoke, and there's certainly no fire. There's a lot wrong with us, but Afrikaner persecution is not one of them. I think we should live this down. I hope President Ramaphosa will be convincing. And I think one other easy step is we should all go and ask Julius Malema please stop this nonsense. Please stop this populist nonsense by singing that song that is 40 years old and it's not appropriate anymore. You just give ammunition to our enemies. But we should live it down. We should live our lives. A constitutional democracy, we should take hands and we should make ourselves more prosperous. I mean, already we have, and that's what the one thing I had to point out to everybody is we're governed by a government of national unity, where the big partner to the ANC is a majority white democratic alliance. We have one of the leaders of the almost exclusively Afrikaner party, Freedom Front Plus, as a cabinet minister. Now, does that sound like a genocide in progress? Come on.
Max du Preez, thank you very much for your time, sir, this evening, talking to...
But what's even more surprising is the reaction from veteran journalist Max du Preez, who didn't hold back during a recent interview with Zoli Mngembi on Newsroom 405. According to Max, there is no genocide in South Africa, and those who fled. He says they'll regret it. Now, before anyone starts throwing tomatoes or waving flags, let's unpack this calmly. Okay, maybe not too calmly, because there's a lot to talk about. From claims of racial discrimination to political narratives being exported across continents, this story touches on identity, perception, and power. So buckle up. The story begins with a flight. A flight carrying 49 white South Africans, mostly Afrikaners, landing in the US, seeking asylum from what they claim is racial persecution and marginalization back home. The American government, under an old immigration policy dusted off and rebranded, has now officially accepted their refugee claims. And then came Max du Preez. If you don't know him, Max is not your average journalist. He's been around since apartheid, literally dodging bullets and battling censorship. So when he talks, South Africans listen, sometimes angrily, but they listen. And Max isn't buying any of this refugee narrative. According to him, these 49 individuals have been sold a myth. A myth that says white South Africans are being hunted, that there's some slow burn genocide targeting them. Max says, flat out, there is no genocide in this country. Period. Bold claim. Definitely. But it's one backed by more than just emotions. Let's break it down. First, the numbers. South Africa, for all its crime, inequality, and load shedding, does not statistically show a targeted genocide against white citizens. Farm murders, which are often cited in this narrative, are horrifying, no doubt. But they affect both black and white farmers, and according to SAP's data, white victims are not disproportionately targeted. It's not comfortable to talk about, but facts matter. Yet the idea of white genocide has persisted, particularly in certain corners of the internet and conservative media in the West. It's become a rallying cry, a symbol of supposed, reverse racism, and government neglect. So when 49 South Africans touch down in the US claiming to be victims of this phenomenon, it doesn't just make headlines. It makes political waves. And Max du Preez is not having it. In his interview, he emphasized how dangerous it is to export this kind of misinformation. It damages South Africa's image. It feeds into a false international narrative. And worst of all, it turns victims into pawns, he said. Now, let's talk about the American angle. Why would the US, under its immigration framework, even consider white South Africans as refugees? The answer, it seems, lies in politics. Certain right-wing figures have long championed the idea of protecting persecuted whites from South Africa, using it as a critique of post-apartheid governance. By accepting these refugees, they score political points back home while sending a message abroad. But what about the actual lives of those 49 people? According to Max, they're in for a rude awakening. Life in America, especially as a refugee, is no five-star experience. There's culture shock, economic pressure, and social isolation. Many who fled in the past have spoken of disillusionment, of missing the warmth of home, of realizing that South Africa, for all its faults, is still where their roots are. Max believes this group will feel the same, and sooner than they think. He even joked during the interview, "I give it 2 winters before they're Googling flights back to OR Tambo." But beneath the humor, there's a serious message. South Africa's problems are real: inequality, corruption, crime, but fleeing under a false banner doesn't solve them. In fact, It might make things worse by reinforcing untrue stereotypes and undermining real conversations about race and power. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. South Africa's Department of International Relations and Cooperation, DIRCO, quickly released a statement rejecting the refugee claims. They called them unfounded, misleading, and damaging. They reiterated that South Africa is a constitutional democracy, and that there is no state-sponsored persecution of any racial group. That's quite the diplomatic clapback. So where does this leave us? Somewhere in the middle of perception and reality. Are there white South Africans who feel marginalized? Absolutely. Are there Afrikaners who worry about their safety, their culture, their future? For sure. But is that the same as being a refugee from persecution or genocide? That's a much harder argument to make. Max du Preez argues that we need to be honest. Honest about the past, honest about the present, and honest about the future. We can't build a better South Africa by pretending we're victims of a war that doesn't exist, he said. We have to confront the real issues: poverty, land reform, education, not fantasize about being targets. Of course, not everyone agrees with Max. Social media lit up after the interview. Some applauded his honesty. Others accused him of downplaying white suffering. Some even questioned his credentials. But that's South Africa for you. Never boring, never silent. So what about those 49 new refugees? Time will tell. Maybe they'll thrive in the US. Maybe they'll regret leaving. Maybe they'll realize that no country is perfect, and every place has its own version of dysfunction. But here's the big picture. The refugee narrative, when distorted, becomes a weapon. It obscures truth, feeds division, and prevents real change. South Africa has a lot to fix, but white genocide is not on that list. In the end, Max du Preez's message was clear: South Africa doesn't need escapees. It needs engaged citizens. It needs people who will fight, not flee, for a better country. And as for those Americans who are welcoming the refugees with open arms and alarmist headlines, well, maybe they should visit South Africa themselves. Take a walk through Mabenang, chat with students in Stellenbosch, eat a bunny chow in Durban. They might realize this country is complicated, messy, beautiful, and resilient, but it's not at war with itself the way some headlines would have you believe. So next time you hear someone say there's a genocide happening in South Africa, ask them this: who benefits from that story? Who profits from fear? And who's doing the hard work of actually building a future? Because that's what really matters. Not the flights out, but the people who choose to stay. Thanks for watching. And if you're South African, white, black, colored, or Indian, don't let anyone else define your story. Not politicians, not Twitter trolls, and definitely not people who think load shedding is the worst thing we've got going. Spoiler alert, it's not.